All right, guys. Really quickly, we're going to go through. This is just a quick recording of the lecture over the results section. So wanted to just get this posted for you guys real quick. Give me 1 second to share here, and then we'll get moving. All right. Okay, so the results section, right? So ultimately, what are we trying to accomplish with the results section? Ultimately, what we're doing is we're stating what happened in the study, right? So a brief statement of meaningful findings without an explanation. So we're not quite to the explanation portion yet, right? That's typically reserved for the discussion section that we'll talk about, in a little bit. But ultimately, what we're focusing on in the results section is attempting to identify findings that are statistically significant. Okay, and so we leave any discussion of what that means or what the data itself means or what it's trying to tell us, right, for the discussion section. So really important when we're trying to relay that information, right? That we try to use language that doesn't complicate the results narrative, right? So we try to kind of keep things simple. We try to use statements that are clear and meaningful to the reader. Um, and so something that might be helpful there, when writing this is imagine that the group that you've studied is reading your results section and is attempting to understand that, right? That might help you actually in kind of keeping things simple, right? So how do we handle complexity though within the results section? So it's not uncommon, as we've seen in studies that we've looked at, for you know the results section to potentially address more than one hypothesis, um, and have more than one variable, right? So obviously, one thing that we need to do is we need to try to stay organized, and include those maybe in separate paragraphs and address them one by one. Um, and obviously the same thing goes with hypotheses. If we are attempting to, discuss or address more than one hypothesis, we need to make sure that, we include those paragraphs separately within the results section. So obviously, what to avoid, right? So we want to make sure um, that we are not duplicating our results section, via our written words, what we're actually writing in the paragraphs in the results section, with potentially tables and figures. So if we have data that's overly complex or maybe overly complicated, it might be best to actually go ahead and divide that, or maybe put that into tables and figures, right? Generally speaking, and I know this is as a consumer of research when I read papers, that it's often easier for me to look at complex data when it's placed in a table or when it's presented in a figure, right, than attempting to decipher that from a paragraph. So, yeah, and so obviously, avoid trying to restate also how you calculated those results. Remember, if you have a discussion within the method, or a section rather, within your method section that deals with data analysis, it's going to be best to leave uh, that information for the data analysis section, right? So just a few tips, obviously, on organizing tables with complex data, right? So obviously, if we're putting a table in, put the title above the table, right? We need to number those tables consecutively if we have more than one, table 1, table 2, table 3, so on and so forth, right? We need to place a table in the text on the page immediately following where we first mention it. So often what we'll find in a paper is if we're going to mention a table, we'll often, be writing our results section and then in parentheses, open, close, table 1, right? And so right after we mention the table 1 in writing, it's going to be important to try to include as soon as possible after that, the actual table, right, in the results. When we're constructing a table, obviously using lines to separate the title of the table from any kind of legend or key figures at the bottom will help keep things organized. Very important that if you have variables in your table that have units of measure, that you indicate what those units of measure are. Maybe it's force, like newtons. Maybe it's weight, kilograms or pounds, right? Vertical lines sometimes can make things look a little jumbled. So that may be something that you want to avoid. So, and if you're only describing one group, you know, in your results section, you may want to also report the sample size of that group. Okay, so obviously a very, very quick and easy presentation here. This will be posted on Moodle for you guys. Just wanted to review that with you. So if there's any questions, please let me know. Have a great evening.